Hey everyone, welcome back to Howtechs. Today we're going to do a little bit different type of video than we normally do. We're going to talk about the iPhone XS and XS Max dual SIM card specifically, and I'm going to do it as kind of a Q&A. And the reason I'm doing this is because since I released my videos now 8 days ago since this phone came out, as you can see, I got a lot of views and I've gotten tons and tons of comments for all kinds of things, and a lot of them are duplicate, and I'll try to summarize them all together here in a document and address them all. So if you guys want to learn about specifically the dual SIM version of the iPhone XS, just watch this, and you can always read what's on the screen if you want to skip ahead. Okay, so first of all, most frequent question we got: where can I buy the dual SIM version of the iPhone XS Max? So I got the Hong Kong version actually from my phone carrier because I live in Hong Kong, but there is at least one online seller who's selling the Hong Kong version, including the dual SIM version, and that's expansis.com.hk. I have no affiliation with them. I'm not going to earn anything off this, but that's the one that I found, and I know Expansis has been around for a long time, like more than 10 years. So I think they're pretty legit. No guarantees. Don't take my word for it. Do some research, but that's one place you could consider getting it. Okay. So the second most frequent question I got was, how does WhatsApp work on a dual SIM phone? And so variations of that question. Can I do dual SIM? Can I do dual instances of WhatsApp on my dual SIM phone? Can I run basically WhatsApp on both SIM cards, etc., etc.? And people wanted me to show it and all that. Well, there's not really much to show, either for WhatsApp or for other apps. The way WhatsApp works is your account on WhatsApp has to be tied to a SIM number, but the physical SIM actually doesn't even need to be in that phone. So sometimes, like, I use my WhatsApp account for my Hong Kong number when I'm in a different country and I have a different SIM card in there. And when you switch the SIM and then open the app, it asks you, do you want to switch to the number on the SIM you're on or stay on your main one, your real account? And so it's basically the same thing here. Um, there's no place to add a second account within the current app as it currently is. There's no way to sort of recognize that you have two SIMs and receive WhatsApp messages from both. So at the moment, unless they change the app, um, WhatsApp works like it does on a single SIM phone, exactly the same. And so it would be the same as if you had WhatsApp running on a phone and then you put that SIM card in. You had like multiple SIMs running on multiple phones, and you had one of them working with WhatsApp for one of those numbers, which wasn't necessarily the one in that phone. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so same thing for most apps. I think there's a way if you had like the phone jailbroken, that you could probably do it, or if you were using like, let's say you were using WhatsApp as on one number and you were using like a WhatsApp compatible like emulator type app on a second with a second number. So perhaps like Kakao Talk or one of these other apps had a way to like send messages to WhatsApp. You could do something like that. So maybe WhatsApp couldn't do it, but other apps could. The only example I can think of, this is really old school, is like you could run ICQ with one ICQ number on your computer, and then you could run an emulator like Trillion, which could log into an ICQ account and then send messages. So that is a way to get to two numbers, basically, to two QQ numbers or ICQ numbers or whatever. That's really old school. Sorry about that. Shows you how old I am. Okay, next thing up is people griping about the fact that the iPhone XS Max sold in other countries, not China, not Hong Kong, doesn't have the dual SIM. And I understand the frustration, and I feel really lucky that I live in this market because that was literally like one of the biggest selling points for me to get this phone. This is my personal phone, actually, that you see in the videos. Not always in the previous videos. I don't use every phone that I do how-tos for, but this one is actually my personal phone, which is why I got it so fast. But anyway, as far as like why they haven't done it in other markets, I would say this is kind of a conspiracy theory. It's purely conjecture on my part, but I would say that it's because the carrier, in some carriers, especially the carriers who do SIM lock phones, would not allow or were very against the idea of Apple doing a dual SIM phone in some of their markets. So basically, if you have a dual SIM phone, SIM lock is impossible, right? So no one would buy a dual SIM phone where the both SIM slots were locked to the same provider, right? That defeats the purpose. Like, why would I have two phone numbers from one company, in one region, and only have that in both of my slots of my phone, right? So for me, for example, I have a China number, so I use the China card when I'm in China, and I have the Hong Kong number. I can leave both of them in the phone all the time. So I need to be able to use a outside SIM, or actually in Hong Kong too. I have, you'll see in one of my next videos, I have one card which is like purely data. It's got like 20 gigabytes of data per month, and I share the data with other family members. And then I have my longtime, main phone number card, which doesn't have that much data because I have the other card. So now I have them both in the same phone. I don't have to do a hotspot. I don't have to switch phones. It's actually pretty awesome for me. But the cool thing is you can't do that if it's SIM locked. So I'm guessing in countries like Japan and the U.S. where the carrier only will sell phones that are SIM locked to their cards, they were like running scared when the whole idea of a dual SIM card came up, because you could get the cheapest possible plan from that company to get a subsidized phone and then rack up high data bills on a different card that is at a much better rate, right? So people would basically be getting the subsidy without all of the expenses going to the carrier. So I could see why the carrier would want to block that, or why Apple would want to help the carriers out by not selling something better. So, what does that mean? Maybe in the future sometime Apple, say Apple Japan, would only sell the single SIM card version through the carriers, but maybe if you bought directly from the Apple Store, you could get the dual SIM version. Who knows? Okay, so next question: is the dual SIM version only available in the Max version? So actually, it's not. And this was a case where Oliver White, who was one of the other audience members, actually corrected me. Turns out the 10R is also does also have a dual SIM version for HK and China. So I was not aware of that. Actually, I forgot that from the unveiling, the WWDC or whatever it was, the Apple event. But both of them can do dual SIM. So that might be another option. If you don't want to pay for the 10s Max, you could get the 10R. And actually, the 10R is pretty good. I would actually consider getting that, except it doesn't have the dual cameras. So if you want the dual cameras and you want dual SIMs, you got to pay through the nose, and you got to get the big phone. If you want the smaller phone, okay, you can get the 10s if you want dual cameras, or if you don't need the dual cameras but you want the dual SIMs, you can get the 10R. 10R comes in nice colors too. Okay, will it support CDMA? Got a couple questions like this. What model is it, etc., etc. So according to the back of the box for my Hong Kong version, it does CDMA, GSM, UMTS, LTE, etc., etc. So you do want to check what frequencies your carrier in your country are on. So in some cases, not every. So for example, my model can do GSM, but it only might be able to do 800 and 900 and 1800 megahertz or whatever it is, right? But maybe in your specific country, maybe in France, your carrier uses 1700, right? So your SIM card wants to use a phone that has 1700, and it won't work for one that's at 800 or 900 or 1800. So you got to be careful and double check. That said, pretty much every country I've ever traveled to with my iPhone in the last, let's say, 10 years, from iPhone 5 upwards, or iPhone 4 even, works in the US, works in Japan, works in Korea, where else? Singapore, I haven't been to Europe with my iPhones, but pretty much I'm pretty sure they work globally, all around Asia, mainland China, you name it. Um, the bands, there is a band in every country that you can use, and so depending on which SIM card you have, not a problem. Okay, uh, this was actually kind of a cheeky question we got from people. Does the iPhone XS Max have the same hardware? In other words, if I change the SIM tray to the dual SIM spring tray, will it work? And this is not the only guy who asked this question. We got at least 2 or 3 more. Basically, is the hardware exactly the same on both versions of the phone, except for the design of the SIM tray? So in other words, if you put a XS Max dual SIM tray into a XS Max not dual SIM phone, dual SIM tray phone, will it actually fit and will both SIM cards work? That's a good question. So the question is basically, is the socket on all XS Maxes really able to handle dual SIM card contacts? Like, does it actually touch all the, does it read from both cards? Do the metal contacts run on both sides on all of them? And so that is a good question. I'm going to hazard a guess that probably it wouldn't work because that would be too easy to defeat. There would be a huge market for dual SIM tray knockoffs in that case. But then on the other hand, from a manufacturing point of view, wouldn't that be much easier? They just make one version of the phone and they only switch out the tray. It's too good to be true. I don't think they're going to do it. And again, like the carriers would be pissed if they found out. Okay, so somebody was asking, Sanjeev here was asking about VoLTE, and I wasn't really familiar with the answer, but I found the answer researching something else. So basically, that's dual voice over LTE, which is basically a way to do a phone call over the data line rather than through the phone line. And supposedly, I guess it's better quality. Depends on your carrier uses up your data, but for some people, it's better. And so dual VoLTE will be available later this year through software update. This is actually taken from Apple's website for, I guess, the XS Max page, but it's the same on all of the versions. Will be available later this year through software update. Not all carriers support dual VoLTE. Certain restrictions apply. Learn more, blah, blah, blah. So you can check this out. Just Google for this phrase, and you can find it on the Apple page. But the question here is, so if I am using if I'm using 2 different phone plans from 2 different companies, can I use voice over LTE for either number, including the alternative company, on one of my cards? Because keep in mind that the XS Max only uses one of the data plans at a time. It doesn't use both at the same time. So you can switch from one to the other, but you can't use 2 simultaneously. So in this case, if I want to use dual VoLTE, does it switch to that carrier's LTE signal, or does it try to use card A's LTE signal to do card B's voice call? So that's the question, and I think that's one of the things they're talking about. Not all of them will support dual VoLTE. The other thing that it mentions here is it does not support simultaneous use of 2 CDMA wireless service plans. So this is another thing they didn't really talk about in anywhere I saw it. But so for example, if you had two Verizon or 2 Sprint numbers. Does Sprint still exist in the US? I don't even know. Basically 2 Verizon numbers in the US that were both CDMA plans. Could you run both of them in an iPhone XS dual SIM? Apparently not. XS Max, I should say. Apparently not. So I don't know. No one uses pure CDMA anymore anyway. It's all WCDMA and UMTS as far as I keep track of. So I don't know if that's a problem, but there might be some people who face this issue. In this case, you might want to switch carriers. Okay, next question. Isaac Scott says, hey, my main concern are the messages. Are your messages from your primary number and secondary number all jumbled up together, or within the message app are they separate sections? So I think, Isaac, you're giving way too much credit to Apple. They did not redesign much of this phone to make it dual SIM. So just imagine, you can already tell what it looks like from your existing iPhone. So for example, I have a contact that sends me an iMessage or sends me a text message, the text message, or let's say the iMessage might be sent to my email address. It might be sent to my phone number. It might be sent to one of my other phone numbers that's registered to that iMessage account. And they all show up in the same inbox on the iMessage or whatever, the message app on your iPhone. And so the only way you can actually tell which ID they're sent to is if you go to like the info box and you go and see, and it says like recent after the one that, it's also for phone calls. Like, it's the only way you can tell which number from that person was used to contact you or whatever. So it gets very confusing. And so ultimately on the iPhone XS Max, you just have one timeline of messages, and it's up to you to like check the ID number to see exactly which number it was sent on, I guess. Yeah. So I'll try to actually include that in a video that I'm going to do with some demonstration, but we'll have to wait for that one because it's actually too hard to explain on the just by voice, I think. Okay, so hopefully you guys aren't too bored. I'm only halfway done. Are they standby or full active? He's talking about the phone data or whatever, right? So if you have data on one SIM and you are calling from the second SIM, does the data SIM work while you are calling? So I'm definitely going to have to test this one out. I'm guessing that since both phone numbers for voice are active at the same time, like they're showing the signal, it's not like one is turned off when the other one is on. It's hard to say if that's standby or that's active. And then also given, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but at least for me, you can totally use data on your phone while you're doing a voice call. I do it all the time. So iPhone allows you to do that. Just hit the home button, and you can go back to the home screen and pick an app and use it while you're on a phone call. Since it operates that way, I'm assuming it's the same way for the even if I get a call on a separate number, I can still use the data plan on my whatever main SIM, my data SIM. So keep that in mind. I'll try to test that one out too, but I think that's hard to test. Okay, is it dual active or just standby? Okay, so same question. Dual SIM late? Can you use both internet speed simultaneously? Will you got double internet speed? Do speed test? Question mark. If the answer no, then it's useless future for me. Okay, so Kuwait ball. Sorry, what is that? It's like a Kuwait flag with eyes on it. So Kuwait ball is very adamant that he only wants it if he can do double speed. So I'm gonna have to say probably no. It can't use both. Basically, it only uses one data card, one data plan at a time. So you have to either choose if you want to use data on the primary or the secondary. It doesn't switch back and forth, and it definitely doesn't switch back and forth automatically. You have to tell it to switch. And it also doesn't do them both at the same time. So I don't think you can get dual speed, double speed, whatever. So maybe, hey, Kuwait ball, maybe wait for the iPhone 11, or who knows, that might be an OS 13 or something. That could actually be a data thing. Who knows? Like a software thing. Okay, so next up, is it possible to flight mode the primary SIM but still use the second card? Thanks. Actually, this is a really interesting question. Not something that I thought about, and I actually had to go and check. So you can do airplane mode on the whole phone, and then you can also do airplane mode and still turn on like the Wi-Fi and things like that. But there is no way to do either Wi-Fi mode or whatever to disable a single SIM. You can disable the data on the phone, which would turn off the data on both. You can turn the data on. You can pick which one would be on if it's on, but you can't tell it for the phone to only work on one phone number and not the other one. So that's something that I'm sure is absolutely easy to fix in software. It's just not something they've done yet. So maybe in the next revision, there'll be a switch to turn on one number or the other. Like I could see how that would be totally useful. Like for example, I'm getting annoying calls from somebody on my business number while I'm at a movie theater, but I still want my wife to be able to call me on my home number. my personal number, things like that would be pretty good. I don't want to have to pop the SIM card out or whatever, right? So yeah, that would be a good thing if Apple, if you're watching, which I'm sure you're not, think about that. Okay, this guy actually asked the same question twice on two different videos. Uh, Loopy wants to know, does locked only for China HK telco provider only? No, as discussed above, like the dual SIM card really needs to be unlocked for it to really be useful. And in this case, there's no kind of like whatever Hong Kong and China SIM card association where SIM cards made by these companies work and SIM cards made by not these companies don't work. There's no kind of differentiation like that. It's either locked to one provider or not. So in this case, no one's going to buy a dual SIM card, Hong Kong version that is locked, and actually even a single version. Pretty much here, nobody buys a single locked only phone as far as I can tell. I've lived here for dozens of years, and no phone, or I've been coming to China for a long, long time, and the whole concept of a SIM lock in this market is pretty foreign. And if you told people like, hey, by the way, you can't switch providers with this phone, people would be freaked out. And actually, that's built into the plan. So, for example, in Hong Kong, you guys probably don't care about this, but in Hong Kong, you actually, when you get the phone from your carrier, in most cases, at least in the case of my carrier, you don't actually get the phone cheaper or not very much cheaper. What you do is you actually basically pay almost the full price of the phone, and then they take that as kind of like a deposit, and then they subtract it from your phone bill for like the next 24 months. So, maybe I have a 300 Hong Kong dollar a month plan, which is like $40, and then I get a $800 iPhone from them or through them. And so because they get me the phone early and all that, and they want to give me some incentive, I sign a new contract with them. And so I still pay, actually maybe not 8,000, 800. What did I say? 8,000. Say $8,000 iPhone 10s, right? That's about 1,000 US. So I'll pay maybe 800 US, which would be something like 6,000. It's called 6,000 Hong Kong. And then they'll actually deduct, for the next 24 months, they'll deduct like 150 Hong Kong dollars from my phone bill. So my monthly phone bill will only be like $20 instead of $40 US. So it'll be like half off because I basically prepaid a large amount for the phone. And so that's how they get you. You still get the phone early, and you get access to it, whatever. You get it subsidized, but you're actually paying up front. So that's sort of built into the fact that the phone's not locked. So yeah, you could go and sell it to someone, but you already paid them. Anyway, let's continue. I'm getting too much into the phone plans of foreign markets that most of you guys don't care about. Okay, how does the Hong Kong dual SIM version, does the Hong Kong dual SIM version have any restrictions like language or keyboard as opposed to the default one iPhone in Europe? So, as near as I can tell, there's no software difference between this phone and any other. Like there's nothing Hong Kong specific about iOS that would limit you to something. So I guess, maybe if you bought the French version of the phone, it would know that you're in France and maybe boot up into French in default. But no, I think it still asks you at the beginning anyway. So for this channel, I turn on a lot of phones, and definitely like the China, like a Xiaomi phone or whatever, might only have English and Chinese. But for things like an iPhone or Samsung phone, they're basically all global phones. I don't think they make separate OS versions for different countries. And at the end of the day, you could just reinstall iOS, and I don't think it would like stop working with your dual SIMs because you didn't install the Chinese version or something like that. So that's not a problem. Okay, next up, I have two questions. First one is, do Hong Kong 10s Max get the dual SIM tray? Do all 10s Max Hong Kong versions get the dual SIM tray? I'm going to say yes. I can't imagine them having both and anyone wanting the not dual SIM tray version. I don't believe I paid any extra. I don't think there's any extra charge for one over the other. So, like with my carrier, they didn't even ask. That's the one I got. And that's, of course, the first thing I checked when they gave it to me. So next question is, when buying it, do I have to reserve it before from website or just go to the store? Thank you. Okay, so this guy actually answered. So he's basically saying China does not allow that eSIM phone, like the actual dual SIM version in the US. So that's a little weird because I think the 10s would still be allow the eSIM. Maybe the China version wouldn't. Anyway, so let's focus on the second question. Do I have to reserve it? So if you were going to come to Hong Kong for vacation tomorrow and you wanted to get a 10s Max, um, I'm guessing they probably have a supply at most of the stores, especially now it's like a week or two later. If you come back next month, it'd probably be easy just to show up and buy one. Um, maybe the first couple of days they only had certain models or they were out. Um, I have just walked into an Apple store and bought an iPhone, and even though, you know, not on the first day, but within a couple of weeks, nowadays they have the supply chain, so you can pretty much do that. There still are on those peak periods, pickup day and stuff like that for a lot of people. There still are guys who will stand outside, literally stand right outside the store, Apple store, as long as it's not in a shopping mall. But if it's like a one on the street, they'll sit out there and they'll resell phones. Like you can pick one up. If you did reserve one, you could then go and try to sell it to a guy right on off the bat who's waiting outside, and maybe he'll pay you an extra 20 Hong Kong, which is like $3 or $4. It's not the days of the iPhone 4 and iPhone 5 where there was, super pent up demand because it wasn't on sale in China. They're selling them all over the place now, but there still are guys who resell them. Um, and once in a while, if the gold version of the 6 Plus was a good example where like there was a lot more demand than there was supply for a short amount of time. Anyway, continuing. Uh, let's see. Can you insert the SIM slot from the... Okay, with the same question we had before. So as I mentioned before, I should have clumped these together. As I mentioned before, I don't think the slot physically works the same. Doesn't have the same circuit board or whatever, same pins. But who knows? Someone want to try that? Bring your 10s Max here, or next time I'm in the U.S. or wherever, I'll try to find someone with a 10s Max and try it out. Okay. What about blocked apps in China? Can I download them outside the China in HK version? So this is not exactly iPhone. Well, it is iPhone specific, but it's not 10s Max specific. So the question is basically, China has internet restrictions. Um, will that affect your phone? If you bought like a mainland China version of the phone and you were using it outside of China, would Google be blocked or would Facebook be blocked or would you only be able to download certain apps? Um, and so I deal with this a lot actually for my regular work and because I go to China a lot too. So absolutely not. There's no problem with that. If you're using an iTunes account from whatever country you're in, that's what decides what apps you can download on your phone, even if it was bought from here. Um, the Great Firewall is not installed on the phone; it's installed in the basically the internet side, like the physical hardware of the internet in China. There's one interesting thing as a side note. I have a dual number SIM card from actually China Mobile, which is actually the Chinese government plan, but I got it from China Mobile Hong Kong, and that allows me to have with one SIM have both a number in China and in Hong Kong, and so I can get phone calls in China on my Chinese phone number, and it'll ring my phone. And if I'm, let's say, if I'm in Hong Kong, someone in China can call the China number, and my Hong Kong phone will ring, and it won't be an international call. And likewise, if I'm in China and someone calls on my Hong Kong number, the phone will ring in China, and it won't be an international call. It'll basically be a local call. So I have that kind of number already. And one of the interesting things is because actually the plan is through the Hong Kong version of China Mobile, I get to do roaming in China, which is basically unblocked. So as long as you're doing roaming on your phone, and I think this works for other countries' roaming plans too, in China, the firewall actually doesn't apply. Only if you're using a Chinese domestic SIM card do you get the blocked internet. Um, Kind of a side note, I don't know if anyone has any questions about this kind of stuff. You can always leave a comment below, and I'm happy to do a separate video about how the internet works on SIM cards in China. Okay, so that's that one. Can both SIMs support LTE at one time? I think I covered this one before. Basically, they don't both run they can both run LTE. So it's not like slot one only works with 3G and slot 2 works with 4G or something like that. But you only use one SIM data plan at a time, as I mentioned with the dual SIM Kuwaiti guy. So basically, you can only run data on card A or data on card B. So they can both be LTE, but they can't both be at the same time. Okay, now we're getting to the fun ones. Okay, so do you prefer 10s or 10s Max? So on this channel, I have reviewed or I've done how-to videos for the iPhone 10, and I have now had a 10s Max for a week, and I like the 10. I didn't use it like as my personal phone for very much, but I like the camera. I like some of the features. When I came down to choosing, as I mentioned, this is 10s Max. Is it difficult to say? 10X Max is my personal phone. So when I was deciding which one to get, I definitely want to get the 10X Max. And the reason why was, if nothing else, just for the dual SIM, the dual physical SIM. So because the 10 and the 10S don't have that, that's kind of a deal breaker for me if there's an option that did have it. If the 10S Max didn't have dual SIM, would I still get it? I think I would. I've gotten used to the 7 Plus and the 6 Plus and the 8 Plus and all that, the bigger screens. So actually, you guys might not be familiar or aware, the 10 and the 10S, the screen size, like the diagonal screen size, is actually about the same as an iPhone 7 or 8. I should say 7 Plus or 8 Plus. The difference is except for the notch part, right? But so they made, by going all the way to the edges and getting rid of the home button, they basically made a bigger screen on almost the same size phone. So the 10s Max does the same thing because it has, basically it's the same size as the 7. Shit, I screwed this up. Okay, same size as the 7 Plus, but the screen is even bigger. So I like the bigger screen. I'm going to get an even bigger screen if it's available, and now it is, and so I got it. And oh, by the way, it has dual SIM. So that's my reasoning. Your mileage may vary. You might not like having a big phone in your pocket. When I switched from a 6 to a 7 Plus, that was kind of a big deal, getting used to typing with the bigger phone. I'm used to it now. I have to say, comparing a 7 Plus and the 10s Max, they're physically about the same size. I think the 10s Max is actually a little bit fatter, and it's heavier, definitely because it's got bigger battery packed in there. So it does take a little bit getting used to, but within my pocket, it's basically the same amount of bulkiness. Okay, so next question, how's the battery life when using 2 SIM cards versus 1 SIM card? Does active dual SIM drain the battery much faster? This one is a lot of, it's a little bit hard to tell, and it would require me to I don't know, do some controlled testing where I leave it overnight with both of them on and somehow try to mimic and recreate the exact same amount of notifications and other kind of activity on both to see if it drains faster. I might try to do that sometime in the future, but this is actually my phone that I use, so I don't want to kind of tie it up for 2 days straight running tests. Off the top of my head, I said it probably is, there's 2 sets of bars showing up on the thing, so you can imagine there's 2 radios turned on. There's definitely going to be more of a drain. The question is how much faster. Since I don't think we had a separate question about battery life. Personally, I have noticed one of the things that infuriates me about this notch screen is it doesn't show the percentage of battery like my other phones I was able to turn on. So I just get that little kind of graph thing of the battery with the charge level indicating on how green it is or whatever. So it sort of has forced me to keep less track of the exact number for better or for worse. But I've kind of noticed that the 10s Max, as they mentioned, it's the biggest battery ever. It's the best, longest life. Lasts 30 minutes longer than the other one, etc., etc. So I haven't ever gotten too bad on the battery. Like if I leave it uncharging overnight and I, spend the next morning surfing, going all the way to work on a train, which for me is like an hour, I might get into the office and it's down to 30 or 40%, but it's not 5 or 10%. So the battery life has actually been pretty good, and I haven't been watching it as closely as I used to. The other thing is, you guys have to understand, my previous two phones, which I've been switching back and forth between the iPhone 6, which is now, my iPhone 6 is like 4 years old at least, and my iPhone 7 Plus, which had a very bad water spill accident, basically leakage accident, and is kind of on its last legs, and the battery's kind of screwed up. So both of those have a very finicky battery, and like exactly what Apple warned you about the iPhone 6 needing to be slowed down because the battery was degrading. So I probably should have upgraded the battery in that one because it's so old. But it'll go from like 90% down to like 30% in 10 minutes if I open the camera app and stuff. It's very finicky, and it'll jump back up once you plug it in. So that one is what I've been dealing with. So compared to that, the 10s Max is like a dream. Like seems like the battery lasts forever compared to that. Okay, another question about the dual SIMs. So I have a work phone and a personal phone. I would like to get the 10s, and so I don't have to carry two phones. Well, then you probably want the 10s Max. But does iCloud backup work? How does iCloud backup work when you have two SIMs? Do you need to sign into both accounts? How does it back up your information, such as contacts and photo galleries, if you use your phone for work and personal? Well, unfortunately, Mr. Lee, you are, as I mentioned before, you're expecting way too much out of Apple. They have not designed this from the ground up to be a dual SIM phone with everything's kind of walled off from each other. It's basically an extension of iOS to accommodate two SIM cards. So I mentioned in my changing the ringtone video, or in my overview video, they didn't even make dual ringtones available on this phone as it's released right now. So you can't even have a separate ringtone for getting a work call versus a personal call. So to me, that's like a huge oversight. That's like the no-brainer. That's the first thing you should do. Much less worrying about iCloud backups from one part of the phone versus the other part of the phone. So, they haven't even done that. Forget about what you're asking for. And it's also very complicated. Like, how do I know which photos to back up? Do the photos go to this iCloud account, or do the photos go to that iPhone account? Or do they go to the both? Like, they'd have to really redesign a lot to incorporate what you're asking for. There are some Android phones and I think some Blackberries which were very good at like totally segmenting off like two separate devices. There was some Hong Kong startup that did an app like that, where basically it would like be sort of a virtual phone inside your phone, so your work stuff could all be backed up separately and all that. None of that exists on this iPhone. Okay, let's get to some of the fun ones. We're down here at the bottom. Boss, this phone is not yet into market, says Ravi. And then this wise guy said, well, I must be a time traveler because somehow I filmed the video with the phone that you're leaving a comment on, Racha. So Racha, not the smartest guy in class there, can't figure out that maybe his market is not the same as everyone's market. So I thought I was pretty clear that this is the dual SIM phone from Hong Kong, but perhaps Racha skipped ahead and missed that and decided to comment anyway. Okay, another one from India, I guess. Mr. Raju says, your English is excellent in comparison with other Chinese. Well, I hate to break it to you, Raju. You could probably tell from looking at the video from my hairy knuckles, I am not in fact Chinese. So I am a non-Chinese American. I am a white American who happens to live in this part of China, Hong Kong. So yeah, that's why my English sounds like I'm not from Hong Kong or from China. So anyway, that's basically it. I have some other questions which I will try to do demonstrations for. These are just the ones in my notes. And so people want to see more about how the messaging works. So I'll try to display that with like a screencast, not a screencast from the phone, but I'll actually, physically film myself using the phone and physically, film the screen to show you what happens, like my normal how-to video. What does it look like when you get an incoming call? I actually did demonstrate this in the community tab of this channel. You can see some screen grabs of what that looks like. And what happens when you're taking portrait mode. I did a photo how-to video for the the camera app, and people are saying, hey, they don't see the photo edit mode showing up why. And then last but not least, can you text from either number? And obviously I want to show that as well. Some of these things I've looked up, but unless I'm showing you physically how to do it, I can't describe it because I don't remember exactly the procedures. And so I'll just do a screencast or whatever, filming myself doing it, and you guys can see how it works, just to answer all those really nitpicky questions. So thank you all for watching. If you listened and watched to this point, I didn't expect this to go 40 minutes, but thanks for watching. I'm happy to do another one of these if you really, really have a lot of questions. But of course, the comment section is good too. And if you like this kind of format, I can do this for other phones as well. iPhone XS Max is a little bit unique in that, as I mentioned, this is the one I'm carrying around with me nonstop for the past 8 days. But I could do that with the other phones we get as well. So most of those phones, for anyone who's wondering, we get we basically borrow them and we give them back. So I don't carry them in my pocket for 8 days straight. But given the strong response from this XS Max video, I'm definitely considering trying to get my hands on more of these phones on the first day and answering all these kind of questions that people have, especially if it's a big thing like an iPhone. So look for more of these in the future, hopefully, if there's a good response. Okay, and thanks again, everyone who watched all of our videos. This is, these numbers are not huge by comparison to our other things, but the speed with which they came, so this channel, both under my tutelage and other people, has been around for quite a while, 8 years and counting. And yeah, some of these get millions of views, but these are all like 7 or 8 or 5-year-old videos. Probably the oldest one, I think I have one video from maybe the last year, which is over 100,000 views. So to get 60,000 or 40,000 views in a matter of a week is pretty cool. It's great to see that there's people who like this kind of content, especially something very specific like the dual SIM card, and we get to show off something unique. Okay, so that's probably the newest one, 99,000 views. Okay, so that's not not something to brag about. Oh, no, here we go. The good old Nokia 6. Everyone loves that one. Okay, so that's it for today. If you guys have any questions, please leave a comment in the comment section below. I'm glad to continue this conversation both here in the comments and in the community section, so I'll try to use that more, the community tab. If you guys have any more questions or requests or whatever, let me know. Okay, see you later.